So in some gaming communities, specifically Magic the Gathering, there's the concept of a solved format or a solved state. And human beings generally like patterns. They're comfortable, after all, and who doesn't need a little comfort from time to time? But when it comes to storytelling, humans are also very guilty of repeating themselves ad nauseum. So, can we take the concept of a solved format and apply it to anime genres? Now, of course, it'd be very easy to get overly reductive here, and that's not really the point. After all, the hero's journey, outlined in Heroes of a Thousand Faces, is not exactly an unknown quantity, and while saying giant robot fights bad guy and wins is a little too reductive for my liking, there might be something to it in some cases. Some genres do just fall prey to it more easily than others. That's not saying it's bad, it's just kind of an observation, so don't lose your minds just yet. And with that, we're going to look at some types of shows that end up looking solved and what you can do to freshen it up. So, solved for the purpose of this exercise means that you can pull a find and replace on characters and situations, and they don't change that much. The twists, if there are any, aren't particularly shocking, and the series is built so heavily on tropes that you can kind of set your watch to it. This is a problem that happens with any medium over the years. The simpler the stories can get, the better and easier to produce they can be. That's why sitcoms and romantic comedies are what they are and why they're so ubiquitous. So, to start off, let's check in with how rom-coms are in general. So, the biggest problem with rom-coms is not that they're solved story-wise, it's more that they don't really have much in the way of characters to latch onto. Disposable at best, the characters, male and female, and everyone in between is just tired. It's run its course, and while rom-coms at their core are designed to appeal to people who aren't really part of any specific subculture, so-called normal people, that means that they don't really get a lot otherwise going on. So a good example of how to make it interesting, which is not the same as saying good, by the way, is Kiss Him, Not Me, where the love interests are almost entirely shallow idiots, and only one of them ends up being someone worth being by the end. But that trick requires the setup of the whole show to begin with, so that's not a sure shot. A possible fix for this is that it just needs to feature more queer folks, preferably written and voiced by people who are whatever brand of queer folk you might be. Dump the fan service, focus on making characters that are a little bit more diverse, and yes, this is a big ask, considering that Japan likes to call itself homogenous and has a lot of societal systems entrenched to back it up. There are interesting stories to tell here, but doing this requires leaving the comfort zone, and that's not really what rom-coms are about. In which case, you would want to go with something more like Super Gals or My Romance Story, where it's got romance elements in it, but it's also like a snapshot of the era that it was made in, or at least has a striking or interesting art style. I'm not saying this is a sure kill, but it could draw more eyes into a stagnant genre. Likewise, get into subcultures. In the same way that Super Gals did gal culture, do more subcultures like that, and kind of put a spotlight on that, maybe for good or ill. Whereas these sort of characters are kind of either punchlines or side characters in your normal rom-com, why don't you make them the star of the show? See what happens. Now, in the same situation as rom-coms are the everyday life shows, which hit the scene in a big way with Azumanga Daioh, morphed into Lucky Star, peaked with Nichijou, and yet we still keep making them. By the time we got to Nichijou, it was a parody of itself. And likewise with Daily Lives of High School Boys. That makes it work really well. Unfortunately, that's the signal of the death knell of a genre. Running parallel to this is Cute Girls Doing Cute Things shows, which suffers from the same problems. While the everyday life shows have a lot of life left in them because they keep going abstract and peculiar, Cute Girls shows are definitely falling into that find and replace category. Even if the designs are good and the cinematography is interesting, it's still very much junk food anime. Sadly, I can't really see a particularly obvious fix for this, but as long as they keep going back to the well of absolutely bizarre, it'll probably sort itself out. But who's to say? Harem shows are a lost cause to my thinking because they're even less about characters and much more about waifus and tropes. And now that we've gotten interspecies reviewers, I think pretty much everything is covered as far as kink material, yeah? I think it could be argued that Tenchi Muyo began and ended the magical harem genre pretty much single-handedly, and the genre has been muddling along ever since. This one presents an interesting problem because there's not a lot that can really be done to make it interesting because it relies so heavily on tropes to create its characters in entirety that it's almost not worth worrying about. It's important when considering your genre to take swings at what the purpose of the genre is, of course. In this situation, harem shows don't really have much in the way of storytelling to grapple with. Love Hina basically figured it out, and that was the end of it. Idol shows are kind of in the same boat. They actually do what they do exceptionally well, which is generate pop songs and disposable idols and promote whatever CD or gotcha game or whatever other tie-in they have attached. Bugs and features and all that. So weirdly enough, the fix for this has actually been found and shown to us with HoloLive specifically. Alright, walk with me on this one, but consider this. You can follow these VTubers individually in their own generations or as a collective, and they're all equally represented as can reasonably be expected by their company. They're all different, they have their own personalities and performers, and now you have an a la carte idol experience. The performers all get to flex whatever skills they have while maintaining a continuity of character because of the digital aspect for it. So rather than idols all needing equivalent screen time in an anime or otherwise falling to the wayside, or in live action, aging out of their groups, VTubers can do their thing in perpetuity, and HoloLive can use their resources to support them with merch, digital concerts, and all that. Ta-da, we fixed it. Following that, the whole magical girlfriend show, like To Love Ru or Dragon Maid or stuff like that, are a little less of a weird problem, but they're still walking a very dangerous line. Hina Matsuri had this problem as well, in that the magical character just breaks stuff in a person's house, and that's supposed to be funny or comical. They're literally homewreckers. There's the joke. It's kind of irritating to try and go through a show where the romantic lead or the character that we're supposed to be like, "Aww," with is just being a pain in the ass when the other person just wants to have a nice, ordered life. It was funny when it happened with Ataru and Lum, because Ataru was a piece of shit. It was tedious when it happened in Nagasumi and Sun, because Nagasumi is a poor bastard. And at least in those two examples, the characters are rich enough to repair the damage they do. But the main problem here is that they're written by people who enjoyed those old shows and know what happened, but don't really have a good grasp on why it happened. At best, it's filling episode time until the next big plot, and at worst, it's that old, this is how it is written because this is how it is written problem. Incidentally, this is how a lot of shows end up just being poorly written because it's been made in such a way that seems to function on the outside as a coherent story, but not one with any depth. Characters do things because the plot demands that they end up there, regardless of if it makes sense or is narratively satisfying to do so. But that's just an issue with the industry overall. I won't say that science fiction is exempt from this, but it's mostly just a matter of waiting out until the next big thing in sci-fi happens. Because people who are writing sci-fi are like 10, 20 years ahead of what's being created, right? And it's going to take 10 to 20 years for the stuff that's being written now to get produced and turned into shows. With some of these shows, they desperately need a kick in the ass. Sci-fi, you just kind of have to sit and wait for it. Same with fantasy. Even if the isekai chunk of the genre is pretty much copy-pasted, there's a lot that can be done with a shonen style of anime, even if it feels like an easy target to laugh at. But those shows generally cost more money to produce than the other genres that I pointed out. So if you're curious how that happened, well, there it is, economics. Isekai manages to skate past this because that's where the big money is right now. And you can still just make a ton off of merch because it's all about the boing boing and really uncomfortable fantasies. Looking at you, redo of a healer, or whatever it's called. So, as a final point, I will say that a lot of anime feels really samey and dull for two very specific reasons. Number one, there's more anime being produced now than ever before, and that's not inherently a bad thing, but they don't have enough of a creator pool to draw on to make stuff more than what sells and what's popular. maximum revenue for minimal risk. That's the name of the game. The second reason is that, at least back in the days before streaming, anime releases were filtered a lot more over in the States. So we just got the good stuff, or at least the stuff that they thought would sell. There were still plenty of stinkers that got released over here, of course, but it felt more varied. So what, right? Well, I guess I can't really say that there's a fix to offer up in general, because money talks and I don't got a lot of it. But I guess if you can help it at all, give views to this stuff that aren't really the popular thing this year, which is hard to do because the popular stuff usually has some kind of redeeming qualities. But without sounding too dour, there just isn't a lot that we can do on this side of the puddle. Ultimately, support the things that you really love wherever you see them. Solved or none, it's not like these genres are on the risk of dying out, but maybe with some collective action, we can start to shift where the metrics are leaning towards something a little bit more interesting than Oni-chan Fuck Me Gently Season 17 or whatever it is. That being said, this is Professor Otaku, the greatest American anime critic, signing off.